we all need ways to feel good when we're feeling bad. But what ends up happening is we start learning as we grow up the things that we find help us feel good in these situations. And I had these ideas around addiction, and I just thought it was the substance. People get addicted to nicotine, and that's just how it is. Some people are more prone to addiction than others. It turned out that what's going on is smoking just becomes a form of self-regulation. What happens is that you get this sensation, this feeling of kind of being relaxed. It feels nice. It's like, oh, I'm feeling stressed, I'm feeling overwhelmed. You smoke and you feel relaxed. And then that just starts, building in this pattern, this habit, and that continues throughout life. The problem, of course, is when you want to give up smoking, you're trying to give up your form of self-regulation. So what do you do if you're feeling stressed, if you're feeling anxious? So it's about finding new tools to take their place.
Welcome to the Mindform podcast, where we delve into the minds of some of the most interesting people on the planet, discuss psychology, philosophy, and personal growth, and share the wisdom we uncover with you. Join us as we explore the art of forming our minds. Here's your host, Frank Lawton.
Kia ora from New Zealand. Welcome to another episode of the Mindform podcast, an extension of the Mindform collective and training platform. This podcast is similarly a space dedicated to exploring and altering psychological landscapes together. In each weekly episode, I speak with a member of Mindform to extract wisdom, refine ideas, and collaborate on the game of architecting our minds. So this week's guest is Elliot Freeman, based in Wellington, New Zealand. Just like me, nice to have another Kiwi on here. Elliot is a coach and facilitator who crafts experiences of connection. That's connection with self and connection with others. For this, he uses the resources of mindfulness, conversation, somatic awareness, nature, and even ceremonial cacao. Elliot ventured into the space from the corporate world after receiving coaching himself and getting excited about the personal and felt and sort of growth dimensions of life. So I'm just keen to see what unique wisdom we can uncover here in this story and this work that Elliot does. Let's see. Welcome to the Mindform podcast, Elliot.
Thanks, Frank. Yeah, and beautiful little synopsis of my life. That was nice to hear. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, I had to shorten it because when we met last time, it was an hour long, I think. level of detail there.
Good blurb, I feel. Yeah.
Right. So, what's alive in you right now, Elliot? How are you feeling?
Actually, you know what? There's a lot of nervousness that's alive for me. Yeah, which is quite a nice feeling. That sense of kind of like tingling in the heart and in the chest area.
Yeah, I kind of miss it. I don't really get it anymore, which is funny. I feel like if I went on like with the podcast, I mean, like if I don't not get it in life, I certainly get it. But like if I went on someone else's podcast, I'd probably start getting anxious. But this is just the routine now, even though I know that random people are watching me on the internet.
Yeah, it's interesting, hey, how that feeling fades, because I felt the same way when I started running groups, and that kind of like all that anticipation, or actually like stress would sort of come over me, and then after a while you just kind of click into that sense of flow.
Yeah.
But you know what I would love to do, like a little practice just for myself, actually, and if anyone's listening and they want to follow along, I find this helpful just to regulate my nervous system, and it would help me settle into the space. If that's okay.
Go for it.
Yeah. So it's called sort of physiological sighs, and might be familiar with it, but it's just breathing in through the nostrils and then letting out an audible exhale. So on the microphone, I apologize if it sounds a little bit odd, but just 3 of these, and I find that it really helps to calm the nervous system and sort of bring me into the space. So if that's cool, we can do that together, Frank, if you like.
Yeah, sounds good.
Cool. So just breathing in through the nostrils, and then at the very top, audible exhale. So we can just do that in our own time. So breathing in. Nice. And it's amazing what I feel immediately after that, just like a sense of warmth, kind of like a grounding feeling. And I've been experimenting, sort of introducing that into different spaces, because I think it sort of come from, a lot of this sort of like facilitation work, but actually I've been introducing it into the office I work at 3 days a week at a charity, and just noticing that in meetings, in all sorts of settings, is actually a very helpful tool.
It's funny, there are a lot of little things like that are so easy to do that we don't think to do in normal culture that have such a profound impact. And it's funny the effort and work we'll put into trying to find a bit of peace or release, that we put a lot more effort into much less effective strategies. It's I look forward to a world. I anticipate it surely, but I look forward to a world where these are just the normal strategies for achieving that. These quick and powerful, usually somatic or physiological based things.
Yeah, and it's interesting, isn't it, really? Like, the more advanced we become, the more we discover ancient technology that turns out just to be the breath, movement, dance, connection. These are the things that we were just doing in society for thousands and thousands of years. It's in our biology, and we're rediscovering it, and it's like this profound thing. And, now there's huge industries popping up around it, but it really is, that simple. But what I find is it's sort of relearning it. So I've had to go through this process of experimenting with lots of these different techniques until eventually it becomes embodied, so that I know within myself what technique to pull out when I'm feeling a certain way. So it's just that repetition that helps build familiarity, and then kind of becomes that autopilot.
Yeah, absolutely. And you think of, I just said, why isn't this the norm? It is. It's just we don't practice it, and we have other habits. It's to do with how we're parented and schooled and all of that. We're not. If this kind of stuff was repeated as much as other things are repeated in our early upbringing, I'm sure it would be instinctive.
Yeah, and that's kind of a key passion of mine is this whole area is kind of called sort of self-regulation. And what's interesting is that we all need ways to feel good when we're feeling bad, to put it simply. But what ends up happening is, because we're not provided these tools, they're not given to us. So we start learning as we grow up the things that we find help us feel good in these situations. Just so happens that with time, we look back and we realize, oh, wow, actually, these weren't very healthy for me. So I got fascinated by this because I was working on a hypnotherapy program to help people quit smoking. And I had these, sort of ideas around addiction. And I just thought it was the substance. People get addicted to nicotine, and that's just how it
Mm-hmm.
is. Some people are
Yeah.
more prone to addiction than others. And then as I looked into the research, it turned out that really what's going on is smoking just becomes a form of self-regulation. And very often it forms at such an important age. You're sort of 12, 13, you're seeing your parents smoke, or your friends smoke, you get into it. And what happens is that you get this sensation, this feeling of kind of being relaxed, right?
That feeling, yeah, the sigh
That
out.
feeling, and it feels nice. It's like, oh, I'm feeling stressed, I'm feeling overwhelmed. You smoke and you feel relaxed. And then that just starts, building in this pattern, this habit, and that continues throughout life. The problem, of course, is when you want to give up smoking because you realize it's actually, affecting your health. Um, you're trying to give up the thing that is your form of self-regulation. So what do you do if you're feeling stressed, if you're feeling anxious? So it's about finding new tools to take their place. And I think it's true for all of us. What I realized in my life is that my form of self-regulation had become my mobile phone. So if I was feeling anxious, I would just unconsciously pull out my phone from my pocket, and then I'd be scrolling, and just kind of lost in the doom scroll. And that was it. And I could do that for hours and hours and hours, and very often before bed. And, you know, that was just my way of coping. So, especially over the last 5 or 6 years, I've just been on this journey of building awareness about my habits, my patterns, and then finding new tools to regulate myself so that I can feel more embodied, more present. Because when I'm in my body, I'm more attuned to my sensations. It helps me to connect better to others, to be more present to conversation. And then that's kind of nourishing. So it becomes this virtuous cycle.
I remember encountering a research study on smoking and mindfulness, just to connect two parts of what you were saying that weren't brought together explicitly. So, in this study, the process was training people in a bit of mindful awareness and sort of walking them through, and then sending them off into their own lives to do this, walking them through being really aware of everything they're feeling and everything that's going on when they want to smoke. Not There's no instruction in this to like hold back or not smoke or anything like that. When they want to smoke, picking up the cigarette, smoking it, the taste, the feelings, the heat, the shift in your body, all of these things, and and the impact was really, really profound, that a lot of people just kind of their view of smoke. Like we all have, people have their view of smoking. Okay, it's unhealthy, but I need it or whatever. But that whole view system for them changed. Oh, I don't like this that much. Or yeah, it was interesting reading some of the different ways that this shifted. But it seems that just having an awareness of what you're feeling gives you access to that level of learning, I suppose, that earlier level of learning, and they're going through that experience again, and they're checking it and they're tracking it, and I guess they're making that connection. Oh, I'm just doing this for that particular moment of feeling that I get when I'm smoking, but there's all these other things I'm feeling and tasting and seeing, like shame thoughts that are coming up, or whatever it is, that I don't like. And when you can just see it for what it is, then they were put in this position. Oh, okay, maybe I'll try a different strategy. I'm curious just about the hypnotherapy context. So you guys were doing hypnotherapy to eliminate smoking, and that's around. I see like ads for that in Porirua where I am, and I'm curious. You talked about the effective way in your mind to escape from these habits that are self-regulating habits but have harmful side effects is to come up with a new way of regulating yourself, or come up with something that fills that void which isn't so harmful. Is that the approach that was taken with hypnotherapy, or was that a different approach altogether?
Yeah, essentially, the hypnotherapy program itself becomes the new form of self-regulation.
I see. Okay.
So it was an app, so you would listen for just 15 minutes a day to an audio, and then the idea was if they sink into this new behavioral pattern, they become more aware of how good that feels, how
I
good
see.
it feels actually, because hypnotherapy is very similar to meditation. It's just entering into an absorbed state,
Yeah, yeah.
and from that point receiving new ideas and beliefs. So guiding them into the body to help them notice what it feels like when they slow down, when they just tune into their body. And we also included those sort of mindful smoking activities, these exercises, because you're right, you need the awareness, first of all, of of the sort of adverse consequences of your behavioral patterns in order to want to change them. And we're so good at just suppressing. We're so good at having these big blind spots, because something I'm exploring that I'm curious about right now is almost this belief that whatever we're doing, it's because we want to. And we might not think that we want to do it, but there's a feeling, or there's an avoidance of a feeling that's causing us to continue with this behavior. So we actually have to meet the pain, the suffering of it, in order to then realize that we want to change it.
Mm.
And the problem, of course, is then you have to be open to experiencing that pain, but we're so, we prefer to just push things away.
Absolutely. I would add on to that even, we want to for a reason that it might not be like a perfectly logically sound reason, but it's a reason that makes sense from a perspective, right? And so, yeah, I completely agree that it's the way you get access to that reason, and you can change. It's like you're probably familiar, maybe not, with internal family systems, right? We have these different parts of us that have different needs and different coping strategies, and when we have different things that we want, like for example, to feel regulated when we're stressed, but also to be healthy, just in the smoking, then we have this inner conflict. Oh, I want to do this, but I'm doing this. Why? Um, but when you can bring these two parts of yourself together, where there's that actual mutual awareness of understanding what the other part wants, right? When those wants are brought up, empathized with, validated, then there's the opportunity for transformation there. And I love how much that is a reflection of the real family systems we have and the real conversations we have with each other, right? When there's two people and there's conflict there, it's that lack of understanding and that lack of empathy that's the root of that. And when we can come together and just, okay, why do you want that? Like, what are you needing? What are you afraid of? What are you feeling? All of that. Suddenly, there's the opportunity to find new ways to meet those needs. And it's just profound. It probably just speaks to the fact that we speak to ourselves the way that we're shown in the world how people speak to you, or how people speak to each other. So, oh, I don't like this behavior. That's dumb of me. Rather than, oh, why am I doing that? What am I looking for? How can I meet that need? Um, if we talk to each other that way, maybe we'll talk to ourselves that way. That'd be nice.
Totally. Yeah, it's very, very helpful to uncover or to take the perspective that we are composed of multiple parts, because otherwise there is this inner conflict and it doesn't make sense. We want to be a certain way and yet we're behaving in a completely different way. And then that creates that tension, that frustration, that self-criticism. And I've been in that space for a very, very long time. I feel like the prime example for me was something that I suffered with for years, was just getting out of bed in the morning, and it didn't matter whether I was working in the corporate world, whether I was working for myself. Yeah, I would just always come back to this habit of just snoozing in the morning, and I'd know the benefits of getting out early and starting the day, but I keep doing it. So then I just had this horrible internal conflict, and I'd start the day resenting myself, hating myself, feeling that I was just incapable, that I can't even get out of bed in the morning, right? When I started to look at it in terms of these sort of opposing parts or opposing needs, or what is it that I'm actually looking to get out of this behavior? What are the advantages for me? Then it started to make sense, because I realized, okay, this is another form of self-soothing. I've learned this pattern that if I snooze, I feel good, I feel safe, I'm kind of like protected from the world, I'm not having to deal with the stress. And this sort of inner criticism was not helping me, because then it was just making it even worse. Then I didn't want to face the day even more. So just approaching it from a place of self-compassion was enormously powerful. And something I find very helpful with these patterns is actually seems counterintuitive, but it's actually to allow yourself, because so often we have these patterns and we don't want them and we resist them, but we keep doing them. But what if you just allowed yourself? What if you allowed yourself to keep doing it and take the pressure off trying to stop? And it's funny, really, what happens. There was a story I read that really sort of connected me to this idea, which was with a mindfulness horse whisperer. Believe it or not, that's a thing. His approach was all about co-regulation of nervous systems, and horses are incredibly intelligent and incredibly sensitive. And so there was this one horse that he was working with, and the family that owned it, they were at their wits' end, because every time they tried to get on the horse and ride it, it would just start riding backwards. It would trot backwards, and then it would just sort of throw them off. And it didn't matter whether or not they were trying to, kick it or whatever it was to make it go forward. It just never was effective. And so this horse whisperer approached it, just with some curiosity, with some care, and eventually built a little bit of trust, and then got on the horse. And then the horse kept going backwards. But what he didn't do was resist it. He didn't try and kick it and shape it in a different way. He just turned behind him and just allowed it to trot backwards. And then when it did that for a little while, it just slowed down, stopped, and then started moving forwards.
Yeah.
And it was almost a sense of, it was just looking for a little bit of safety, that it wanted to be seen for what it wanted. And then when you meet, whether it's a horse or you meet this internal part of yourself, it's amazing. It just opens up and releases, and you find yourself in complete collaboration with yourself. Like you say, with internal family systems, it's this sense that finally there's like a parental figure, which is yourself, which is providing that love, that care, that nurturance that we're all looking for. But very few of us actually had that upbringing. So when you can bring that to yourself with that self-compassion, it's amazing. And so now what I find out is that I'm just waking up spontaneously very early in the morning, without effort. And I just have this sense of like energy coming up through me. So there's none of this resistance. I mean, this has been a journey for years, so it's not as if it can happen overnight, but just that approach of, kindness to oneself, slowness, and just allowing yourself. And then you can find in that space what is actually going on with this behavioral pattern. But you have to allow it first and see it for what it is.
I did not expect a mindfulness horse whisperer story to be so legit and move me so much. I was like, damn, that's awesome. But I get you, man. It reminds me of, I think I've told the story once before on the podcast. I was studying psychology at uni, and we had a behaviorism course. Now, behaviorism is if people take it as a philosophical approach rather than just like a way of understanding the different influences, some of the different influences on behavior, it can be really problematic, because it's basically like you if people behave in a way you don't want, the way to change that is to harm them or punish them or make it unpleasant for them. And if people behave in a way you do want, you or to get people to behave a way, you reward them for that, right? So it's really that that sort of pressure, manipulation, force kind of dynamic that right now you're sort of arguing against, and certainly causes problems for us, right? When we have that, we're trying to force ourselves, we're trying to motivate ourselves to quit smoking, we're trying to scare ourselves out of smoking, whatever it is. And we were learning this, we were hearing this story about a camp, or yeah, there was a young boy, an autistic boy at like a some camp, I don't know what it was, with his school, and he kept taking his pants off. In fact, I think it was like a special week-long camp for kids who had developmental issues, and people, it was a real problem, because there's like safety. He's a kid, and stuff can happen at camps. So like, it's just keeping this kid safe and learning appropriate boundaries, and they kept trying all this behaviorist stuff to get him to wear his pants. So like, basically making it unpleasant for him when you took them off, and making it trying to reward him for having his pants on, and eventually, and so what would happen when they would put his pants back on? He'd start screaming, and it was really really just disturbing and upsetting, and disruptive, I suppose, as well, to them wanting to do whatever they were doing at that camp. So, eventually, someone was like, maybe he's right though. Like, and so they went to his house or to the shop or whatever, and they bought him some just new pants with a completely different fabric, and the issue completely resolved. He actually just, it was physically painful or really uncomfortable for him, whatever that fabric was on those pants, and all it took was a moment of someone going, oh, actually, he's trying to meet a need here. Let's just let him. And this whole battle and all this agony just disappeared. And that was a real insight for me. I took that away from my behaviorist course. Behaviorism is crap. Okay, good to know. Yeah, that was,
Yeah.
I that story has really stuck with me.
Yeah, and I mean, a couple of things are really interesting to me about that. The first is that he's autistic, and people with autism are hypersensitive.
Yes. Right.
So both my brother and my sister are autistic, so they're very attuned to this heightened level of sensitivity to things that other people are not perceiving, right?
Yeah.
And this kind of happens in society at large, right? We can't really see what's going on in people's internal world, and we make stories and judgments about it because we don't understand it. But the second thing that was interesting to me about that is, that form of behaviorism. Ultimately, that is how we've been grown up. For a lot of us, it's very conditional. You do good, you get rewarded. You do bad, you get punished, and that just shows up in our life everywhere. And then it's funny that is internalized. That's how we treat ourselves, and that's why it's such a struggle for us to really understand what unconditional love is. And it's something that I've explored in myself when it comes to just self-love, to self-acceptance, because there is this real feeling that, well, I'm not good enough unless I do X, Y, Z. It's not enough just to be me right now. It's very hard to get our heads around that. The feeling that we almost need to deserve happiness, joy. So that's one of the biggest things to unwind. And for me, it starts with myself. Is, can I bring unconditional love to myself? So in that example where I was sleeping in, can I love myself anyway? Can I love myself just the way that I am, even though this might be a habit that I want to change, that one part of me finds frustrating? Can I bring love? And then what happens is that starts to radiate outwards. And that's kind of the journey I'm on right now is, okay, can I keep bringing sort of more of a feeling of unconditional love to myself? And then what is it like to love others unconditionally? Not to want or need something from the people in our lives. And that's a real challenge, just relationship issues and attachment styles and how everything shows up because we have certain expectations, and that's why I figure like Jesus Christ is just almost mythical, right? Someone that could actually love the person nailing him to a cross.
Yeah, crazy.
You know?
Yeah, that's all, like those moments, like, when I read those stories, those are the aspects, those are the pieces that that matter to me. You know, some people, there I guess there are different parts of that whole narrative. You know, it's obviously it's a powerful story. It carries across the world, and there are different parts of that narrative that speak to different people. But for me, it's that. It's like the question I ask is like, what is alive in someone? What is going on within somebody who just feels compassion for somebody who's hurting them, or you know, is really willing to completely drop their sort of self-protectiveness. And it's a little bit hard to imagine, and it's so unfamiliar in the world that we live in. But what I imagine is that it's a really joyful place to be, because you know we live in this battle, right? We live in this fight all the time, and with this sort of behaviorist and competition based frameworks that we grow up in, right? This sort of violence mode that is just the normal of the world. We everything's a fight because it's like there's the sense that things need to be a certain way, and if there's something in a person or there's something about a person that doesn't reconcile with that, either the way things need to be is in danger, and that's, oh no, that's a big problem, or the person is a problem and then they're in danger. So if that person's you're what's wrong, you know, you don't feel safe or whatever. And if that person's someone else, you might want to punch them in the face or kick them out of your tribe or insult them or whatever it is, so that they don't disturb, you know. But I when you were talking about oh, I have to deserve joy, you know, the sense that like it's something to earn or whatever. I really like this idea of understanding like how do you understand positive emotion and negative emotion, especially these really you know, not just the surface level stuff of like physical pleasure or physical pain, but those real like joy and agony and all of that. Um, and trying to come up with a definition, one that I really like is um, those positive emotions are just emotions that, by their very nature, are things that are saying this should happen. Like that's what an emotion is, and it's or that's what like a positive emotion. That's what joy is. It's like joy is how like everything we build, all these moralities we build. My understanding of it is that these are models we use to understand the way our behaviors affect the way we feel, and our feelings motivate those, and our feelings are what stops us from getting there. So yeah, joy is how we should feel. That's what I see it as. And so it's odd to me that we can build such a way of perceiving ourselves, perceiving each other, that decides that sometimes joy shouldn't happen, or sometimes agony should happen. Like you know, these things are part of life; they come and go, and it's not to say we should always feel wonderful all the time. It's to say that I think we're a bit out of touch with ourselves when we deny ourselves joy in order to meet some idea in our brains of how things we should be, of how we think things should be. Anyway,
Mm. Yeah, and I think it's interesting as well in what you're sharing, the importance of language and how we talk about these things as well, and
totally.
then how that shapes our worldview. Because, for example, what you said was joy is how we should be,
Mm,
and that these are positive emotions. So already what we're doing is we're kind of like relegating a whole
good point.
other suite of emotions, you know, and that's how we end up suppressing them. That's how we end up sort of creating a shadow, is because we only want to invite in certain ones. We feel like this is how our life should be. But from my experience, I really like to focus on my own direct experience, what's going on in my own body, because that's all I can ever know. You know, so within me, what I've noticed is, you know, the more open I am to heartbreak, to
Yeah.
loss, to grief, the more I can let in joy, the more I can let in, you know, ecstasy or whatever feeling it might be. But it's almost a sense of vulnerability that's required. And that's what can be so difficult for all of us, is in the vulnerability of truly fully feeling something, because there's then so much risk. I had an experience just recently where I just launched a new meditation group, and then I went on a date with someone new, and it was all very exciting, and I felt so good. Just my whole body was alive and electric, and I was so excited. And then the next day, it's like I shut down, and I just felt closed off. I could feel this contraction. Then these old thoughts and patterns came in. But what I did was I sat with it. In the past, I might have just avoided it, gone on my phone, distracted, whatever. I sat with it and I tuned into the feeling of what was going on. What is it like, this contraction that I was noticing? This, feeling of closedness in my chest, heaviness, like I was sinking into the feeling and just being with it, even though it feels like it might swallow me up. And then softening to it and allowing it a little bit of space around it and actually speaking to it and asking, what are you trying to tell me? Because very often emotions, I see them as messengers, right? So we can think,
Yes.
and that's one form of message, but also an emotion is a message for us. And as I'm tuning into it and asking it, it's revealing to me what's going on. And the story it had for me was, I'm afraid of losing this. So I just had this amazing open experience of joy. And then the next response is, I don't want to lose this. So I'm going to contract and close myself off to it, because that's been a safer strategy for me. If I just stay numb, if I stay closed, well, then I've got nothing to lose. But, but of course, I've now reached the point where I've met the pain of that. I know what that's like in my life. And actually, I'm actively choosing to step into this vulnerability, into the pain, because I know on the other side is incredible. It's an openness in my body. It's a great feeling of love and attunement. And so it's worth it for me to experience the suffering that comes with it as well.
What is the language that reconciles these, what are apparently contradictions, right? Because I'm completely with you, everything you said, and by the way, that's awesome. That's really hard to do, So congrats on that, sort of being able to access that, because it's I totally believe, and you've said this as well when we spoke last time, that a full life is a life where you're facing it, where you're feeling it, and that's being that's being in the arena, that's being there for it, and to feel and to experience is sort of the quality of being alive. So if you want to be alive while you're here, you got to do that, and the less you do that, you're living less. So I'm all for that. At the same time, one of the things, or part of what's so beautiful about your willingness to, or anyone having that willingness, being able to face negative emotions, sit with it, is that you get that opportunity to, and then it's transfigured, it's understood. I like that, and then joy comes out of that, right? I like Marshall Rosenberg's language about emotion. This is the nonviolent communication guy. He says, I think he says, firstly, there are no positive or negative emotions. There are emotions you feel when your needs are being met, and emotions you feel when your needs are not being met. And that sort of speaks to your signal idea. But of course, what do we want? We want to meet our needs, right? So those are the emotions that come. That's the joy. But yeah, if we don't listen at the same time, it's sort of it's you get all the way into mindfulness and Buddhism and these spiritual traditions. It's that core contradiction of, and Jesus on the cross is another perfect example. What you brought up, it's you face, accept, and fully lean into the worst parts, and that's the best. That's the joy. So if you want to not feel pain or to not suffer, if you want to feel really good more of the time, then you lean into the suffering. You accept it for what it is. It's it's understandable that that's a hard thing for us to grasp, and that it's an easy and automatic habit for us to push away these negative feelings.
Totally. Yeah. And for me, it's the distinction between the internal and the external, because what you were describing earlier, in our conditional behaviors, is that we're very often trying to control what's outside of us. If someone has displeasing behavior, we'll try and control them. and it might be unconscious, it might be manipulation, or it might be external in the sense that we feel like, oh, okay, if I get this job promotion or I move to this country, then I'm going to feel a certain way. Then I'll be okay. Then I'll be happy. And so we're so outwardly focused. And for me, it's natural to be that way, right? Like our eyes are pointing outwards. That's what we're seeing. So we're so exposed to external stimulation. The challenge is, how can we turn that inwards? And that's what I love about meditation and mindfulness, because it's actually casting the light of awareness inside. And what you discover is that whatever is infinite outside of you is infinite within. And so you can go on this inner journey of like uncovering these sensations, uncovering these feelings and these new states that I personally didn't even know was possible, because how could I? I wasn't attuned to it. I wasn't feeling it. So we're just increasing the sensitivity of our instrument. And what's beautiful about it is finding this internal sense of resilience. Because if we come to the point where we realize whatever happens externally, I can handle it, then that is power. That's what power is to me, because it doesn't matter whether something goes my way. It doesn't matter that the apocalypse is happening outside, because I know that I have the resources, I have the skills, I have the self-compassion to be with myself and to handle it. And there's a beautiful book by Viktor Frankl called Man's Search for Meaning, which you might have read.
Yeah,
and
we've
that
read
was
on Mindform as well as a group, so that was a good one.
amazing. Sure. Yeah, I mean, that story really stuck with me because it's so harrowing, right? It's talking about one of the worst experiences in human history, with the Holocaust, and the psychologist's observations within that space of what happens within human behavior. And that's the most extreme example of what can happen to all of us, or what will happen to all of us, which is the stripping away of everything, stripping away of identity, of possessions, and ultimately beliefs. Because in that space, when you've lost everything, well, that sense of faith, whether it's religious or internal faith, is gone. So then how do you survive in those conditions? And really that sort of exploration of understanding, that personal freedom, he describes it, the sort of, I think the gap between an action and a response or something like that is where he talks about a stimulation and response is in your freedom. Can you choose how you respond to a situation? So that's what I'm practicing in my own life. And then I think the paradox or the irony is that the more that you go inwards and the more that you explore these things within yourself and you find self-compassion and love, and things become unconditional, then things also open up on the external as well. It's like the Tao Te Ching that talks about, those that want power can't have power, but when you don't want power, then you have power. It's this paradox.
Yeah, another core paradox that's through all the spiritual traditions. Of course, the Buddha says he who has mastery over 1,000 men compares not to he who has mastery over just one man himself. Jesus, of course, there's this whole servant leader model. The last will be first, he who places himself at the bottom will be at the top. All of that. So there's something powerful about that, and I think one way of, I guess, making sense of it, of outside of something that might feel or sound a little bit esoterical or obscure, is that the world we build together, like our society, is the rules, the interactions we have, even the buildings, the institutions, all of this is a reflection of the way we choose to engage with each other, the values we have, etc. Right? We create the world as it is, and of course that's truer now than it ever was. But even in a world where it's not all man-made stuff and we're out in the wild, we still create the world, because how the relationship we have with the world, how we extract resources from it and use it, and all of that is again, it's a reflection of our values, of what's inside us, right? So when you come from a value system of one, accepting what is, right, taking things as they are, being willing to face it, that core thing of willingness or openness or acceptance, that's an internal orientation where there aren't parts of how things just are that you're ignoring, and then those parts don't have power over you, and suddenly there's all this power, right? But our seek for power, we try to say these are the bits that are okay and these are the bits that are not okay. But when you do that, the bits that you've hidden yourself from, that you've tried to contain in an ultimately interconnected world, are they're working away, they're having their impact, but you are sort of powerless to it. So I see that sort of core orientation of approach and willingness as being really, really transformational. A world of people who are willing to face the things that are going on inside them, and also a world of people who are thinking whose orientation is not who's good or who's bad or what's the right world, what's the wrong world, but what are we needing? What am I needing? And what are you needing? And how do we meet those needs? That internal orientation, through that we build a world, we approach the world in a way where it becomes something that meets our needs, and it becomes something that we have understanding and mastery and joy with every single part of. And so just even in maybe it still sounds a bit complicated, but in a practical sense, we really, really do. Our internal reality has the most impact over the world that we live in, and you're going to get much more power by choosing what appears to be powerlessness, what appears to be surrender.
Yeah, I love that. That sense of the universe is a mirror, and it's true. I mean, in society, there are so many things that we don't want to look at, so we don't. We're not really looking at the climate crisis. We're not really looking at the homelessness problem. We're not really looking at what's going on in Palestine. Deeply, truly feeling it and going into that space for a lot of people because it's so uncomfortable. So we exist in this place of cognitive dissonance where we tell ourselves other stories to make sense of it. So for me, the practical aspect is to become more comfortable and familiar with discomfort. Because in our lives, we will do whatever is possible to avoid discomfort. But can you actually enter into that space? And there's a few things that, I've been practicing that are helpful, on a very simple level. Things like, having a cold shower, right? Or going into a sauna where you're experiencing intensity, right? And not disassociating and losing yourself in thoughts, because that's very common. That's what we'll often do. But actually being in the body and feeling it, feeling these sensations. Because it's interesting that we just have some ideas around sensations, that these sensations are good, these sensations are bad. But they're just noise, right?
Absolutely.
It's stimulation, and actually a better way to look at it is intensity. And when I look at it from intensity, actually I can see that pain and heartbreak, that is a very intense feeling, really hard to be with. But so is joy. Joy is a very intense feeling for me. So intense that actually I'm still learning how to be with it, because my nervous system has to almost like upgrade to be with that level of intensity. So I remember noticing last year, as I was becoming more and more attuned to these feelings, I was walking into town and I just had this sense of joy rise up through me, kind of like through the core of my body, electric feeling. And I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. And then within 10 seconds, it had shut down. And I went into feeling numb, being disassociated, And isn't that fascinating? But of course, at the time, I wasn't quite able to make sense of it. But then with a bit of, reflection, this pattern has become clear that actually, the more that I can increase my capacity within my body to be with intensity, the more I can be with, both the highs and the lows, if you want to call it that way, the full spectrum of emotion. So that for me is a great starting point, is becoming more familiar with discomfort, and then we'll feel more ready to go inwards.
I absolutely adore that. Our listener Kyle is heading off. Thanks for coming, listening live.
Thanks, Kyle.
Kyle, yeah. Elliot, join us on Upwelling sometime. I'm sure a lot of our members will want to chat to you once we get you your membership. But I really want to focus on this one thing that's clearly connecting to everything we've talked about, which is being with the unpleasant feelings. And I see why you've found yourself looking at that as a core skill, a core mastery. As you were talking, I was thinking, wow, there are so many moralities, spiritual paths, kind of cultural ideals that we have. Oh, this is character. This is the way to be, and they all share that in common. You think of like masculinity culture, right? Like the whole, there's poisonous parts to that, and there's beautiful parts to that. But that one of the core things that's an what does it mean to be a man, etc., is the willingness to bear or be with or face, step forward willingly. I mean, ultimately, in its best resolution, it's it's willing, patient, compassionate, stepping into what's awful, right? That's in that culture. But then you think of like the spiritual paths of self-sacrifice. That's the same thing. It's being okay with not being okay or whatever. And you and I have both done the 10-day Vipassana meditation course, right? That's the whole course is exactly that. It's feeling all these different things that are going on in your body, and sometimes the associated thoughts and emotions that come up with that, and just looking at it, just staring it right in the eye, just feeling it fully, and working on how long can I sit with this and not freak out, go somewhere else, look away, come up with some thought strategy to change it, whatever. And I've certainly had the experience a number of times during those meditation courses, and out in my own life now as well, of being in pain and just paying attention to that and watching how it dissolves. Not in the sense, oh, it just disappears, it's gone, but like it's got constituent parts that are not the same thing as that pain, and it's got complexity, and you realize it is just more stuff, more noise, more of the landscape of being alive, and that's what that's what gets me really exhilarated and puts me in a forward facing orientation. Is like, oh, this is just a sign that I'm alive. Like, and the more I'm willing to feel into it, the more it sends that signal to me. So maybe we've only got about 5 minutes left on our call, Elliot. So let's talk a little bit about that skill, the ability to be with discomfort. How do we develop that skill? How have you worked on it? I know you've already talked about these physical things, the sauna, cold shower. I enjoy a bit of that. Physical exercise and endurance exercise would be another example, of course. But yeah, how do we develop the ability to sit with discomfort so that we can live more life more fully? We can see what's under our negative emotions, and we can feel joy.
Mm. Yeah, I think the key for me has been nervous system regulation. And there's a theory, it's called polyvagal theory, but people will be familiar with that sense of being in fight or flight or being in freeze. And that's essentially what it's describing. Um, and for a lot of us, what we don't realize is we might be in one of these states pretty much perpetually, fight or flight or freeze. We're very familiar with those states. And that's just because of the nature of our upbringing. This is the nature of society. We're kind of put into this heightened place of anxiety. And so what it is about learning to trust our nervous system again and to find out what it feels like to be regulated, to find what's called safe and social within the body. And that can feel really unfamiliar. And that's part of the journey is learning to come to that state. And then from that state, when you're in that feeling of safety within the body, that's when you're able to open up to all of these sensations, to all of these experiences. So that's where I would suggest starting. There's a bunch of different tools and techniques for this. I would say the first step is just mapping these two states. So getting a sense of what it feels like in the body. So it would be helpful, for a listener just to reflect on, a time where they felt numb, shut down, disassociated. Invite that feeling back into their body, that experience back into their body, and maybe attune to the sensation of it, and also how they would label it. Because everyone has different language, and language is really important. So for me, I call that state numb. That's when I'm feeling numb. I know, okay, I'm in that state. The second state is this kind of anxious fight or flight. You might be stirred up with a bunch of different thoughts. You might not be able to concentrate too well. That almost like caffeinated type energy. Again, just reflecting on when you might have felt that, when you might have been triggered to enter that state, how it felt in the body, and how you would label it. So when you have these two anchors, these 2 points of reference, then you can start to calibrate as you're going through the day and as you're going through life. Oh, I'm in this state. And when I first started this work, I mean, I could be in a numb state for weeks and not realize it. And then I'd realize, oh, I'm numb. Okay, something happened that triggered me. Now it's getting to the point where I can notice, could be hours, could be minutes, I don't know, it depends, but it's kind of just shrunk down. So when I was describing earlier that I felt joy and then felt shut down, that was that numb state that I wasn't immediately aware of. So learning these patterns of the nervous system, because they're activating essentially to create a sense of safety in your body from what it deems to be a threat. When you've got those two anchors, then what you can do is some exercises to bring you out of those states and come back to regulation. And they require different approaches. So if you're numb and your parasympathetic nervous system is activated, actually what you need to do is a bunch of movement. Could be running, shaking your body, dancing, screaming. We kind of get caught into this idea that, I should be meditating, I should be in nature. But actually, those are very soothing things. What you want to do is to stir your body back, shake it. Because what's happened is our sort of almost reptilian part of our body that goes into the play dead mode has been activated. So you need to get yourself out of that. When you've come out of that place, then you'll actually come back to the anxious state. And this is the interesting thing. You don't come straight back to regulated. It's almost like a ladder. You step down from numbness to anxiousness to regulated. So then when you're in this anxious state, that's when you want to sort of go and do some meditation, something soothing, have a warm bath, a cup of tea, something to really calm you. And again, everyone's going to have different things that work well for them. So it's experimenting. And then you'll find yourself in the space of safe and social. But if you've lived a life where you've been dysregulated for a very long time, and I think that's a lot of us, that's my theory. I was in that place. This is a lot of work. It's going to take a lot of time to become familiar with your nervous system patterns, to find that sense of safety and how that feels, to find that comfortable again. But the work is worth it, because then when you've got that baseline and you find what it's like to be safe and social in your own body, then you feel so much more comfortable facing into discomfort. All of these things that previously would have triggered you and spiked because of the intensity, it's not as intense anymore. Your window of tolerance has increased. So it's gradual. There's no unfortunate sort of, hack that you can do. It's just learning to become more familiar with your own sort of biological impulses.
Awesome. I think that we'll call that the end of our call. Thank you so much, Elliot. It was really nice to get, this framing of, all these different facets of wellness, confronting feelings, but then to come into, this is how we build that. And I've certainly found the same. Just, if I look back on my maturation, I suppose, and my ability to handle life, it's been a huge portion of that has just been slowly through time becoming aware, this is like a sign that I'm feeling this kind of way, and knowing what these signals are telling me, and having the odd way that I have for myself that works to create a shift in that energy. Just like yesterday, for example, I've just started a new job. I came home feeling real lethargic because it was a bit much or whatever, just because it's a new kind of demand on my nervous system. It's a very social role. And I was just, I realized it's become a little bit unconscious now, automatic. I realized, okay, what I need to do is go do a workout, even though that's exactly the opposite of what my signals were. My signals were lie on the couch and don't even hold my own head up, and I did that, and I came home, I felt a lot better. And it's just one little example, but it's the kind of thing, if you're just paying attention, through paying attention, you learn that over time. And that paying attention is the real beginning, I would say. But lots of wisdom there, Elliot. Thank you so much for talking. I'd love to talk to you again, because I had a lot of thoughts through our convo I wanted to go on a tangent on. I'm sure we'll see more of each other. All the best.
Yeah, my pleasure, Frank. Thank you so much for having me.
Bye-bye.
See everyone.
Thanks for listening to the Mindform podcast. I'm Ryan A. Bush, founder and author of Designing the Mind and creator of Mindform. Mindform is an exclusive community and training platform for sculpting your psychological software. Members get access to a group of like-minded psychotechs, including all of our guests on this podcast, gamified growth tools, events and retreats, and a collection of transformative programs for mental health and self-mastery. You can learn more and apply to join at mindform.io/podcast. I hope to see you inside.